Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. We are on chapter 2. It's not that long. We might make it through the whole thing. We might not. We'll see what happens. Chapter 2, Girlhood and Its Sorrows. I must pass rapidly over the stirring events of my early life. When I was about 14 years old, I went to live with my master's eldest son, a Presbyterian minister. His salary was small, and he was burdened with a helpless wife, a girl that he had married in the humble walks of life. She was morbidly sensitive and imagined that I regarded her with contemptuous feelings because she was of poor parentage. I was their only servant and a gracious loan at that. They were not able to buy me, so my old master sought to render them assistance by allowing them the benefit of my services. From the very first, I did the work of three servants, and yet I was scolded and regarded with distrust. The years passed slowly, and I continued to serve them, and at the same time grew into strong, healthy womanhood. I was nearly 18 when we removed from Virginia to Hillsborough, North Carolina, where young Mr. Burwell took charge of a church. The salary was small, and we still had to practice the closest economy. Mr. Bingham, a hard, cruel man, the village schoolmaster, of course, the village schoolmaster was a hard, cruel man, and of course, the Presbyterian minister had a slave. Of course, these things make so much sense. Of course, this is what's happening. Mr. Bingham, a hard, cruel man, the village schoolmaster, was a member of my young master's church, and he was a frequent visitor to the parsonage. She whom I called mistress seemed to be desirous to wreak vengeance on me for something, and Bingham became her ready tool. During this time, my master was unusually kind to me. He was naturally a good hearted man, but was influenced by his wife. It was Saturday evening, and while I was bending over the bed, watching the baby that I had just hushed into slumber, and I presume that she didn't rock straight out of the cradle. It was Saturday evening, and while I was bending over the bed, watching the baby that I had just hushed into slumber, Mr. Bingham came to the door and asked me to go with him to his study. Uh-oh, this does not bode well. Wondering what he meant by this strange request, I followed him, and when we had entered the study, he closed the door and in his blunt way remarked, "Lizzie, I am going to flog you." What? He's going to flog her? I thought he was about to rape her. He's maybe that'll happen. I don't know. He's going to flog her for what? "Lizzie, I am going to flog you." I was thunderstruck. I tried to think if I had been remiss in anything. I could not recollect of doing anything to deserve punishment, and with surprise exclaimed, "Whip me, Mr. Bingham. What for?" "No matter," he replied. "I am going to whip you, so take down your dress this instant." Recollect, I was 18 years of age, was a woman fully developed, and yet this man coolly bade me take down my dress. I drew myself up proudly, firmly, and said, "No, Mr. Bingham, I shall not take down my dress before you. Moreover, you shall not whip me unless you prove the stronger. Nobody has a right to whip me but my own master, and nobody shall do so if I can prevent it." Okay, I see you, Elizabeth Keckley. My words seemed to exasperate him. I am sure they did. He seized a rope, caught me roughly, and tried to tie me. I resisted with all my strength, but he was the stronger of the two, and after a hard struggle succeeded in binding my hands and tearing my dress from my back. Then he picked up a rawhide and began to ply it freely over my shoulders. With steady hand and practiced eye, he would raise the instrument of torture, nerve himself for a blow, and with fearful force the rawhide descended upon the quivering flesh. It cut the skin, raised great welts, and the warm blood trickled down my back. Oh, God! I can feel the torture now, the terrible, excruciating agony of those moments. I did not scream. I was too proud to let my tormentor know what I was suffering. And I'm sure, like, I'm not mad at her about this, but just thinking of the mythos that Black people don't experience pain the same way white people do, things like this, I'm sure, helped perpetuate it, where it was really an effort of will to exert whatever power you can exert, and just fed into the mythology of Black people don't experience pain as much as others do, which still is going on today if we really stop and think about Black women and pregnancy and childbirth and the rate of death of Black women in childbirth versus white women. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I have a great gynecologist, and she listens to me. But even in that, like, I had some moments during childbirth where really it didn't, like, nobody was listening to me. My gynecologist wasn't in the room. I was being induced, and like nobody was paying attention to me and what I was feeling. When my gynecologist came in, though, whoo, she was hot. Um, anyway, let's keep reading. I closed my lips firmly, that not even a groan might escape from them, and I stood like a statue while the keen lash cut deep into my flesh. As soon as I was released, stunned with pain, bruised and bleeding, I went home and rushed into the presence of the pastor and his wife, wildly exclaiming, "Mr. Robert, why did you let Mr. Bingham flog me? What have I done that I should be so punished?" "Go away," he gruffly answered. "Do not bother me." I would not be put off thus. What have I done? I will know why I have been flogged. I saw his cheeks flush with anger, but I did not move. He rose to his feet, and on my refusing to go without an explanation, seized a chair, struck me, and felled me to the floor. I rose, bewildered, almost dead with pain, crept to my room, dressed my bruised arms and back as best I could, and then lay down, but not to sleep. So she got ruthlessly whipped by a man who's not even her master, walked home, and then got beat with a chair because she wanted to know why she got whipped. Oh my gosh. Mm. I rose, bewildered, almost dead with pain, crept to my room, dressed my bruised arms and back as best as I could, and then lay down, but not to sleep. No, I could not sleep, for I was suffering mental as well as bodily torture. My spirit rebelled against the unjustness that had been inflicted upon me, and though I tried to smother my anger and to forgive those who had been so cruel to me, it was impossible. The next morning, I was more calm, and I believe that I could then have given everything for the sake of one kind word. But the kind word was not proffered, and it may be possible that I grew somewhat wayward and sullen. Though I had faults, I know now, as I felt then, harshness was the poorest inducement for the correction of them. Right, being mean to people rarely helps them to behave any better. It seems that Mrs. Bingham had it seems that Mr. Bingham had pledged himself to Mrs. Burwell to subdue what he called my stubborn pride. On really, her stubborn pride. She apparently wasn't sufficiently subservient, so that got categorized as stubborn pride. I got the one hair. Okay. On Friday, following the Saturday on which I was so savagely beaten, Mr. Bingham again directed me to come to his study. I went, but with the determination to offer resistance should he attempt to flog me again. On entering the room, I found him prepared with a new rope and a new cowhide. I told him that I was ready to die, but that he could not conquer me. In struggling with him, I bit his finger severely, when he seized a heavy stick and beat me with it in a shameful manner. Again, I went home sore and bleeding, but with pride as strong and defiant as ever. The following Thursday, Mr. Bingham again tried to conquer me. I love that she's using the word conquer, because she's like, you cannot conquer me. Like, conquering somebody really is just a wholesale defeat. They are defeated in body and in spirit. And she's like, "You are not going to conquer me. You might defeat me in body, but you ain't going to defeat me in spirit." Mm, all right. Mr. Bingham again tried to conquer me, but in vain. We struggled, and he struck me many savage blows as I stood bleeding before him, nearly exhausted with his efforts. He burst into tears and declared that it would be a sin to beat me any more. How much have you beaten somebody that you burst into tears and say it would be a sin for me to beat you anymore? Mm. My suffering at last subdued his hard heart. He asked my forgiveness. This is blowing my mind. He asked my forgiveness and afterwards was an altered man. Did she give her forgiveness? It doesn't say. He was never known to strike one of his servants from that day forward. Mr. Burwell, he who preached the love of heaven, who glorified the precepts and examples of Christ, who expounded the Holy Scriptures on Sabbath after Sabbath from the pulpit, when Mr. Bingham refused to whip me any more, was urged by his wife to punish me himself. What did this woman have against our friend Elizabeth Keckley? One morning he went to the woodpile, took an oak broom, cut the handle off, and with the heavy handle attempted to conquer me. I fought him, but he proved the strongest. At the sight of my bleeding form, his wife fell upon her knees and begged him to desist. Really? So she wants you to get beaten, but when she sees what it actually looks like for somebody to be beaten, she wants it to stop? People are fickle. My distress even touched her cold, jealous heart. I was so badly bruised that I was unable to leave my bed for 5 days. I will not dwell upon the bitter anguish of these hours, for even the thought of them now makes me shudder. The Reverend Mr. Burwell was not yet satisfied. He resolved to make another attempt to subdue my proud, rebellious spirit, made the attempt and again failed when he. Everybody's going to fail. Mm, what a strong woman. This is like in Roots when they're trying to get Kunta Kinte to say his name is Toby. They finally did get him to say his name is Toby. And that was when they knew they had subdued him. And they are trying to subdue Elizabeth Keckley. He resolved to make another attempt to subdue my proud, rebellious spirit, made the attempt and again failed when he told me with an air of penitence that he should never strike me another blow, and faithfully he kept his word. So what she did in her refusal to be subdued was actually subdued them. She conquered as they were trying to conquer her. These revolting scenes created a great sensation at the time, were the talk of the town and neighborhood, and I flatter myself that the actions of those who had conspired against me were not viewed in a light to reflect much credit upon them. The savage efforts to subdue my pride were not the only things that brought me suffering and deep mortification during my residence at Hillsborough. I was regarded as fair looking for one of my race, and for 4 years a white man, I spare the world his name, had base designs upon me. I do not care to dwell upon this subject, for it is one that is fraught with pain. Suffice it to say that he persecuted me for 4 years, and I, I became a mother. So she's glossing over, not glossing over as in not telling us, but she's telling us about this white man who raped her for 4 years and she became a mother. And she doesn't go into detail because she said it is fraught with pain. I can't even begin to imagine. And the stuttering that I included was hers. I became a mother. I just feel her pain in how she wrote that. The child of which he was the father was the only child that I ever brought into the world. If my poor boy ever suffered any humiliating pangs on account of birth, he could not blame his mother, for God knows that she did not wish to give him life. Mm. I mean, I get it. She didn't want to be raped and forced to have this child. But that's interesting that she's all of a sudden referring to herself in the third person. when she said she did not wish to give him life. I think that's something that would be difficult to admit. I didn't want to give life to my child, but the woman who was his mom was living under such circumstances that she did not wish to give him life. And probably not just her circumstances, but the circumstances she knew he was going to be born into. Mm. He must blame the edicts of that society which deemed it no crime to undermine the virtue of girls in my then position. Among the old letters preserved by my mother, I find the following, written by myself while in Hillsborough. In this connection, I desire to state that Reverend Robert Burwell is now living at Charlotte, North Carolina. Hillsborough, April 10th, 1838. My dear mother, I have been intending, and then it stops. Then there's a new date, March 1808. Is that an O? Maybe it's a. Oh, my dear mother, I have been in. So, Hillsborough, April 10th, 1838. My dear mother, I have been intending, and then that says March 1868. So she was writing a letter, got stopped shortly after her salutation, and then completed the letter 30 years later. Oh, never mind. Never mind. That's not what happened. Okay. I see what's going on because I was like 30 years later is a long time to pick up a letter. So, in the sentence that I read, in this connection, I desire to state that Reverend Robert Burwell is now living, and there's an asterisk there that goes to the footnote that is March 1868. So, in March 1868, Robert Burwell was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. But then we're okay. So the letter she wrote to her mom in 1838. No weird date change in the middle. Okay, I'll start the letter over. Hillsborough, April 10th, 1838. My dear mother, I have been intending to write you for a long time, but numerous things have prevented, and for that reason, you must excuse me. I thought very hard of you for not writing to me, but hope that you will answer this letter as soon as you receive it and tell me how you like Marsfield and if you have seen any of my old acquaintances, or if you yet know any of the brick house people who I think so much of. Like, I thought very hard of you for not writing to me. That's the kind of disappointment I probably wouldn't have expressed to my mom. I think it's interesting that she did. And interesting that her letter is beautifully written and spelled and punctuated, unlike the letter that was written by her dad's white mistress. And it's true, spelling and punctuation wasn't standardized, but there was spelling and punctuation. Many of the errors that were in the previous letter just had to do with the person not knowing how to spell and punctuate. This is gloriously written, though. And we knew she could read and write. Her dad, in his letters, was like, make sure you study your books. I wonder if her mom could read and write, or who might be reading this letter to her mom. Maybe that's why her mom didn't reply. Although people do and don't do things for all kinds of reasons. I'll keep reading this letter. And the end of the letter is the end of the chapter, so we are going to finish this. I thought very hard of you for not writing to me, but I hope that you will answer this letter as soon as you receive it and tell me how tell me how you like Marsfield and if you have seen any of my old acquaintances. Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. Or if you yet know any of the brick house people who I think so much of. I want to hear of the family at home very much indeed. I really believe you and all the family have forgotten me. If not, I certainly should have heard from some of you since you left Boynton, if it was only a line. Nevertheless, you've clearly forgotten about me because not nary a one of you have written to me. Mm. Nevertheless, I love you all very dearly and shall, although I may never see you again, nor do I ever expect to. Miss Anna is going to. That's so sad. And reality, total reality, You're not going to see these people again. It's highly unlikely, but just the thought to know you'll never see your family and friends again. Mm. Miss Anna is going to Petersburg next winter, but she says that she does not intend to take me. What reason she has for leaving me, I cannot tell. I have often wished that I lived where I knew I never could see you, for then I would not have my hopes raised, and to be disappointed in this manner. However, it is said that a bad beginning makes a good ending, but I hardly expect to see that happy day at this place. Give my love to all the family, both white and black. I was very much obliged to you for the presents you sent me last summer, though it is quite late in the day to be thanking for them. Tell Aunt Bella that I was very much obliged to her for her present. I have been so particular with it that I have only worn it once. There have been 6 weddings since October. The most respectable one was about a fortnight ago. A fortnight is 2 weeks, just in case you didn't know. I was asked to be the first attendant, but as usual with all my expectations, I was disappointed. Wow. She is disappointed in all her expectations. That is so sad. And again, reality. Mm. For on the wedding day, I felt more like being locked up in a three-cornered box than attending a wedding. About a week before Christmas, I was bridesmaid for Anne Nash. When the night came, I was in quite a trouble. I did not know whether my frock was clean or dirty. I only had a week's notice and the body and sleeves to make, and only 1 hour every night to work on it, so you can see with these troubles to overcome, my chance was rather slim. I must close now, although I could fill 10 pages with my griefs and misfortunes. No tongue could express them as I feel. Don't forget me, though, and answer my letters soon. I will write you again and would write more now, but Miss Anna says it is time I had finished. Gracious, that must be horrible. Hey, you, writing that letter over there, chop chop. It's time to move on to do something for me. Tell Miss Elizabeth that and that was the baby in the cradle. Tell Miss Elizabeth that I wish she would make haste and get married, for Mistress says that I belong to her when she gets married. I wish you would send me a pretty frock this summer. If you will send it to Mrs. Robertson's, Miss Bet will send it to me. Farewell, darling mother, your affectionate daughter, Elizabeth Hobbs. And that was chapter 2 of Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. I'm Rashonda Cade, and this is Reading with Rashonda.